Fears. We all have them. And the true beauty of human fear is that human fear is as individual as any other aspect of you. Your fears are as unique to you as your skin tone, eye color, hair length. Every single thing that's ever happened in your entire life has built up towards what you fear. While you may be terrified of spiders, there's people who every single day allow spiders to crawl across their hands. While you may be terrified of snakes, there's people who allow them to slither across their body so other people can take photos with them. While you may be socially anxious, there's people who absolutely thrive off social interaction. And that's the true beauty of the human experience. Every single one of us, depending on what we've done in our life and where we were born and how we were brought up, has individual things that make them unique. However, just because our upbringing teaches us something known as learned fears does not mean that there is no such thing as a universal fear. In fact, science states that there's anywhere between 2 and 7 universal fears. Fears that every single human is born with. See, while you might be terrified of spiders or snakes or guns, those are things known as learned fears. These are things that your upbringing or the societal events around you have taught you to fear. But these things, like we've already stated, are not feared universally. So what happens in a universe where fear around a general topic creates a devil of proportionate strength? That means the more feared the topic is, the stronger the devil, which is exactly what happens in the Chainsaw Man universe. Devils like the cucumber devil aren't that strong because not that many people fear cucumbers. However, devils like the gun devil are incredibly feared and therefore incredibly powerful. But in Chainsaw Man, there exists a class of devils even beyond the gun devil, and these devils are known as primal devils. Devils based off of primal, universal fears that you are born with. But what are these devils? What are they based off of? What are their abilities and how strong are they? And more importantly than that, is there more to come? Well, in order to answer that question, we do have to do kind of a psychological deep dive on what true identified primal fears are. So today, not only are you getting a lesson on the strongest characters in the Chainsaw Man universe, you're also gonna learn a thing or two about human psychology. And they said I couldn't teach you anything through the means of anime. So with no further ado, let's get into ranking and explaining the primal devils. But before we get into all that, guys, my biggest fear is that you won't follow my anime podcast called Otaku's Anonymous that I do every week with Danny Mata, where we break down everything that happened in anime this week. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And before we get into today's videos, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, hit that noti bell. So, I know what you're saying. As it currently stands, in the manga, there's only 2 primal devils, and that's not much of a ranked and explained video. But I actually have a couple of theories that would bump that number up from 2 to 4, which still isn't much of a ranking video, but this video is kind of like a theory video meets a ranking video meets an explained video. Today we're just doing everything primal devil. But in order to explain to you how we're gonna get that number from 2 to 4, we gotta talk fears. Specifically, psychology's take on fears. It feels important to tell you that before going into this conversation that psychology is not an exact science. It's almost impossible to prove anything in psychology, mostly because most of psychology is based off speculation and observation and not like hard physical evidence. And that's why I said psychology estimates that we have anywhere between 2 and 7 primal fears. Now, I personally believe that the correct answer between this 2 and 7 is 3, maybe 4, as 2 of these 7 fears are backed up with real physical evidence, while the other 5 haven't really been backed up with any official studies. So let's start with the 5 or so that haven't been backed up by real official studies because it's hard to actually test these kinds of things. See, if you were to ask a psychologist in 2023, what are primal fears, they would give you a list of these 5. The first would be extinction. Now, the primal fear of extinction is kind of just an overzealous way of saying death. The fear of extinction is the fear of no longer existing. And therefore, this fear of extinction is kind of a catch-all term used by psychologists to say you're afraid of anything that might kill you. Guns, snakes, heights, gorillas, you get it. Anything that threatens ending your current existence, you're afraid of. The second primal fear that they'll tell you about is mutilation. Now, mutilation is also kind of a catch-all fear, stating that humans are afraid of losing any part of their bodily function, losing the loss of an organ, or having their bodily boundaries invaded. So that is to say, losing an organ, losing an arm, a finger, a toe, or having your actual body invaded by surgical processes or stuff like that. The third fear would be the loss of autonomy. autonomy. This is the fear of being immobilized, paralyzed, controlled, imprisoned, basically no longer having a say in what you can do with your own body. Now that one's interesting for a couple of reasons that we'll circle back to in a second. The fourth fear would be separation, the fear of abandonment or rejection, being rejected by society and becoming a non-person, being isolated from the group experience that is humanity. The fifth fear is ego death. Now this is the fear of humiliation or shame that leads to the loss of integrity of self, makes you begin to doubt who you are. It's essentially the fear of losing your own worthiness. Now, much in the same way that we have a pyramid of needs, where things like food and water are the base of the pyramid and things like mental health are the top of the pyramid, there is a pyramid for your fears known as a feararchy, which goes extinction, mutilation, loss of autonomy, separation, ego death, which makes sense when you think about it because it's hard to be afraid of anything else if you're concerned about staying alive. And while I genuinely believe there's merits to all of these listed primal fears, it's hard to test, at least ethically, if babies, the second they're born, are afraid of death. Because mind you, the separation between primal fears and learned fears is massive. The only two fears we've ever been able to test on babies to see whether or not they're afraid of them from the second they're born are loud noises and heights. Because once again, it's hard to test with a baby whether or not they're afraid of losing their hand, ethically. But at the same time, the fear of height and loud noises could very easily fall under the extinction category, as we fear both of them because they give us a possibility at becoming extinct. But how do we know for sure that loud noises and heights scare us from the moment we're born? Well, the heights thing we know from a study in 1960 that took children and animals ages 4 months to 16 months and placed them in an apparatus where they were walking across clear plexiglass. And there was a point in this clear plexiglass setup that symbolized a fall. That is to say that there was a point when the plexiglass became clear, which would symbolize a fall from a significant height that all of the animals and babies stopped at, proving that humans and other animals, without being imprinted on through outside means, were naturally afraid of falling. And as for the fear revolving around loud noises, that's actually built into our circuitry, not our psychology. See, loud noises trigger something in us known as the acoustic startle reflex, which kicks our brain into fight or flight. And every single baby or adult who has the ability to hear has this reflex. And thus, so far as physical science has been able to prove, the only two things that every single human are afraid of are heights and loud noises. Now, within the confines of Chainsaw Man, we've gotten one of those primal fears showing up as a devil, and it happened very recently. That devil, of course, was the Falling Devil, who we'll talk about later. However, the Falling Devil showing up as a primal devil means that the mangaka of Chainsaw Man understands what primal fears are, and therefore, more likely than not, he understands that loud noises are also a primal fear, which means at some point throughout Chainsaw Man's run, we more likely than not will see a loud noises devil, which obviously sounds a lot stupider than falling or darkness, but that's just the way that the psychology shakes out. Every single human being is afraid of loud noises, and therefore an incredibly strong devil would be made based off of that fear. And the abilities of this loud noises devil could be incredibly cool. Something like the ability to create and manipulate sonic booms, the ability to deafen everybody around it, the ability to startle everybody within a certain kilometer radius to make them run away, or simply the ability to create a sound wave that is able to explode people's skulls. There are almost limitless amounts of possibilities that you could have with a devil as silly as the loud noises devil. However, I'm not even taking into account the loud noises devil in my hypothesis of 4 primal devils currently existing in Chainsaw Man. I guess technically the loud noises devil would make 5. Now, outside of primal fears, there's something known as natural fears. These are fears that we're not born with, but we learn subconsciously. See, we as babies understand to be afraid of spiders and snakes by watching how our parents and people around us interact with them. We as a 2-month-old might see our mother scream when she sees a spider and throw a shoe at it. And we, as a being able to pick up on an emotional spectrum, understand that fear was generated by that object. And that fear was generated by that object to make sure that the person around us continued to live. And these natural fears encompass anything that we as a baby learn to avoid for our own good. And these natural fears include things like spiders, snakes, the darkness. Because here's the thing. Babies aren't born afraid of the dark. We learn fear of darkness. At least we think. See, there is also the possibility that humans inherit fears genetically, as a study was done by Rutgers University that put a series of photos in front of children and adults. And in these series of photos, children and adults alike were told to pick out things like flowers and other things that weren't life-threatening. But also amongst these piles of photos, there were also things that were life-threatening, like snakes and spiders. And amongst both children and adults, everybody was faster at selecting things that were life-threatening, implying that children who haven't yet had enough time to be impressed upon what is actually dangerous in the world through the power of fears passed down through their genome were able to more quickly identify dangerous objects. So while spiders and snakes in the darkness are largely implied to be learned fears, there is a possibility that they're passed down through our genomes. And this could explain why the darkness devil is considered to be a primal devil, even though darkness isn't usually considered to be a primal fear. But darkness being considered a primal fear does make a fair amount of sense when you consider the fact for tens of thousands of years, the darkness is when humans die. And to this day, it still kind of is, especially in the Chainsaw Man universe where the darkness could symbolize a devil sneaking up on you. But these kind of loose rules revolving around what is a primal fear and what isn't opens the door for me speculating that there's other primal devils. So in the manga, we have the Falling Devil, whose existence as a primal devil is backed up by the 1960s experiment using the plexiglass and the children, and the Darkness Devil, whose existence as a primal devil might be up in the air, but also might actually exist as a primal fear, considering the fact that we might learn it through our genome. But if we take a step back from the manga here and look at the 5 kind of catch-all fears that we listed earlier, there's one of those 5 that should have sounded relatively similar to somebody who was very important to the Chainsaw Man manga. And that, of course, would be loss of autonomy. The fear of being immobilized, paralyzed, controlled, imprisoned. This category basically paints the picture of the control devil, a devil whose entire ability was to be able to control anybody that they thought was less than them. And the second that they believed that they were more important or more significant than the person they were facing off against, they would be able to control them whenever the time suited. They could use them to cut down their entire village or fight their best friends or simply just manifest their abilities. The control devil had complete control over anybody that they wanted to, so long as they believed they were greater than the person they were controlling. But the control devil wasn't a primal devil. At least they were never claimed to be a primal devil. Though the control devil did go toe-to-toe with the Darkness Devil. And while the Control Devil was absolutely injured in this square-off, so was the Darkness Devil. The Control Devil, simply by pointing at the Darkness Devil, was able to make it spurt blood out of all of its 4 heads. And while obviously the Darkness Devil was able to bounce back by shooting a sword through the Control Devil and also destroying their arm, it was, for all intents and purposes, pretty much a tie. A tie that the Control Devil probably would have lost if they hadn't made one of the people cut down by the Darkness Devil make a contract with the Hell Devil to send them back to Earth. But still, the fact that the Control Devil was able to battle with the Darkness Devil means that we're paying attention to these 5 psychological rules. And if you consider darkness to fall into the category of either extinction or mutilation, that would put it lower and therefore greater on the hierarchy than loss of autonomy. And therefore, the Darkness Devil being stronger than the Control Devil would make sense. But once again, not even the Control Devil is making it on my list. See, the 2 other primal devils that I hypothesize that will be revealed throughout the course of Chainsaw Man most definitely will be the Death Devil and the Consumption Devil. See, we've been talking about the fear of extinction this entire time, but here's the thing. The fear of extinction devil already exists. See, we've already painted out the fact that fear of extinction is just death, and the Death Devil exists. See, in Chainsaw Man, there's something known as the Four Horsemen, and these Four Horsemen are the strongest devils that aren't primal devils, and those devils are the Control Devil, the War Devil, the Famine Devil, and the Death Devil. Now, these are all devils that Pochita as Chainsaw Man has been going toe-to-toe with for thousands of years. In fact, it was in a battle against these Four Horsemen that Pochita was put in the injured state that he found denji in. And we know that the consequences of this battle against the Four Horsemen is that part of the War Devil was consumed by Pochita, and therefore the War Devil is now significantly weakened, which is why the War Devil now has to live as a fiend in Asa's body. But we've met 2 separate iterations of the Control Devil. The War Devil is now the pseudo main character of Chainsaw Man, and we know the Famine Devil. The only member out of the Four Horsemen we haven't yet met is the Death Devil, which feels oddly coincidental, especially when you consider the fact that even though there's been no studies to see whether or not babies are afraid of death, the sheer fact that they're afraid of falling from a height which would equal death implies that they're afraid of heights due to the consequence of the possibility of dying. In fact, you can say that every singular fear ties to the ability that that fear might kill you. And therefore the Death Devil should ultimately be the strongest devil in existence. See, we're not afraid of the dark because we can't see our hands. We're afraid of the dark because the things that used to kill us came when it was dark out. We're not afraid of falling because it makes our stomach feel weird. We're afraid of falling because the ground is getting closer. So the Death Devil existing as one of the Four Horsemen has always been weird to me. There is no fear more primal than being afraid of death. It's what motivates us to do almost everything. Even those who say they're not afraid of death because they found religion or something are definitely afraid of death. So it's my hypothesis that the Death Devil is also a primal devil and will more likely than not be the final antagonist of the Chainsaw Man manga. But I believe that the Death Devil isn't the only primal devil whose name we already know, because I've also been standing on another theory for a long time. That theory being that Pochita is not the Chainsaw Devil. There would be no reason for Pochita, based off what we know about the power system of the Chainsaw Man universe, to be as powerful as he is. See, Pochita is obviously able to manifest chainsaws from his feet, his head, his legs, and now on things that he's touching, like a motorcycle, but not that many people are afraid of chainsaws, unless every single person in the Chainsaw Man universe has to watch Leatherface cut down teens once a week. Therefore, Pochita having the level of strength that would allow him to battle against all four horsemen simultaneously makes no sense. And therefore, for a long time, I've hypothesized that Pochita isn't actually the Chainsaw Devil, but instead the Consumption Devil, which would be the fear of being eaten. See, the reason I make this theory is because Pochita has more abilities than just chainsaws. Pochita has an ability known as Devil Erasure, which means if Pochita eats a devil, their concept and the devil disappear, and everybody forgets about what that devil was based off of. Some devils that Pochita has eaten are the World War II Devil, the Holocaust Devil, the Nuclear Weapons Devil, and just like that, the idea of World War II and the Holocaust disappear. But if Pochita eats something that's physical, like the Nuclear Weapons Devil, all nuclear weapons on Earth disappear alongside with the concept. Because if the weapon still existed, the fear would just regenerate in a week or so. And the only people who are able to remember these devils that Pochita has eaten are the Four Horsemen and the Primal Devils. Now, obviously, the Consumption Devil aligns pretty closely with the Death Devil, but death isn't something that devils fear. If a devil dies, they go back to hell, and if they get killed in hell, they go back to Earth, and the cycle continues forever. A devil technically can't die. That is, unless, of course, they get eaten by Pochita. See, technically, the Consumption Devil would fall under the category of mutilation, which does technically exist above extinction on the hierarchy. And therefore, if you were just using the hierarchy as a way to find out who would be the most powerful primal devil, it would still be death. However, you have to consider the universe all of this is taking place in. See, well, obviously, every single human and animal on Earth is afraid of death. Every single human and animal, especially in the Chainsaw Man universe, is afraid of being eaten. See, in the Chainsaw Man universe, 70% of deaths are tied to devils. And devils don't just kill humans for the sake of killing humans. Devils kill humans for fuel. The blood of humans makes devils stronger, but the blood of devils also makes devils stronger. And therefore, stronger devils will consume weaker, and therefore stronger devils will consume weaker devils in order to make themselves strong. So now we have animals, humans, and devils all afraid of being consumed. And while the fear of being eaten may not be a primal fear, it is almost definitely a natural and or genetically based fear, because the reason we are afraid of the darkness is because the things that wanted to eat us were in the darkness. Humans for thousands of years existed in the food chain, and in the Chainsaw Man universe, they are still very much in it. Which means that in the Chainsaw Man universe, there has been no break from the cycle of there being a greater apex predator. Which means humans in the Chainsaw Man universe are just as afraid of being eaten as our Neanderthal ancestors. But where the Consumption Devil, especially as it applies to Pochita, takes one step above the Death Devil, is that devils are afraid of being consumed, specifically by Pochita, but devils aren't afraid of being killed. Now, obviously, being consumed by Pochita does equal death, and therefore the fears are certainly similar. But somewhere down the line, if hypothetically the Death Devil is the final boss of Chainsaw Man, the fact that the Death Devil understands that the only thing that can kill it is the Consumption Devil, Pochita, will push Pochita's fear and therefore Pochita's power a little bit over the Death Devil's. As Pochita understands, if the Death Devil kills it, it won't die. And that small bit of fear will be instrumental in closing off the manga. So all in all, we'll be left with 4 primal devils: darkness, falling, consumption, and death. And I believe genuinely the weakest of all of these primal devils is the primal devil we were just introduced to in the manga, coming in at number 4, the Falling Devil. The true irony of this is that the Falling Devil represents the only actual primal fear represented in the Chainsaw Man manga currently, as Loud Noises hasn't showed up yet. But nothing we've seen from the Falling Devil thus far has showed us anything in comparison to what we saw from the Darkness Devil. But what's cool about the Falling Devil is that they represent both the physical fear of falling and the mental fear of falling into depression. You see, we actually don't know what the Falling Devil looks like, at least what their true form looks like, as the Falling Devil that we've seen created itself out of the corpses that it created by appearing on Earth. As the second the Falling Devil appeared on Earth, all of the people around where it appeared immediately threw themselves off their balconies. And from these corpses, the Falling Devil created itself a body. Now, the Falling Devil, as a primal fear, has existed for as long as humanity has, and has never once in all of those years ever died. And this is probably mostly to do with the fact that the Falling Devil has nigh absolute immortality. As she stated in chapter 125 of the manga, that it was absolutely impossible to kill her with any means currently available to humanity. And it doesn't matter how many times that Devil Hunters or Denji has slashed her up, every single time she reassembles her body. On top of this, she has the ability to create doors that are able to send anybody that she wants to hell, meaning she has the ability to travel between hell and Earth freely. On top of that, she also has gravity manipulation that allows her to manipulate the gravity on herself, people around her, or her entire surroundings. And this gravity manipulation isn't just tied to making something light or heavy. She's able to direct gravity in any direction at any strength simply by pointing her fingers. On top of this, she has an ability known as traumatic anti-gravity that forces all of the people around her or people she selects to shoot up into the air, defying the forces of gravity depending on how much trauma they have. However, if you have no trauma, this ability has little to no effect on you. But if you have a lot of trauma and you reach a certain height, you fall into a door to hell. And her control over gravity manipulation is insane. We've seen her pick up entire apartment buildings and throw them. She can make the gravity so dense in an area it flattens everything in it. And she can levitate herself and fly at incredibly high speeds. But don't worry, if you've lived a particularly nice life, you can still be affected by the Falling Devil, as the Falling Devil can control your thoughts to make them incredibly depressing and therefore shoot you up into the air with anti-gravity. However, if you're a devil like Denji, you can simply slice up your own brain so the thoughts get distorted. And the cherry on top is that she also has human manipulation that allows her to manipulate all of the humans around her to basically do whatever it is she wants. The reason I put her last on this list, though, is that her body is incredibly non-durable, as we've seen baseline Devil Hunters and Denji slice her up multiple times. And while obviously she always has the capability to bounce back from this, it does incapacitate her for enough time that people are able to escape. Now, after her on the list is the only other primal devil we really know about thus far, the Darkness Devil, who admittedly is a bit of an enigma. See, the Darkness Devil, unlike the Falling Devil, didn't speak or really have any personality. It's just an entity of, well, pure darkness. It, just like the Falling Devil, has existed for as long as humans have and has never known death. And while it's never been explicitly stated that the Darkness Devil has the same ability of immortality as the Falling Devil, it's largely implied, which would lead us to believe that the Darkness Devil, just like the Falling Devil, can't be killed by any conventional means that humans currently have access to. On top of this, however, the Darkness Devil also had immense speed. Being able to travel so fast, it was able to basically teleport in the middle of a bunch of devil hunters, one of which was Quan Chi, the first devil hunter, said to be one of the strongest devil hunters and one of the weapon hybrids, one of the strongest people in the Chainsaw Man universe, without them even knowing what was going on. And as the embodiment of darkness, the Darkness Devil has the ability to control and manipulate darkness, which it can turn its own body into. And when it manifests this ability, it conjures the body of 10 bisected astronauts for some reason. Whatever the reason, it's one of the hardest manga panels in existence. It can then turn this darkness into the Blade of Darkness, which it can control telekinetically. And this blade has bells attached to it. Anybody cut by this blade will hemorrhage every time these bells jingle. On top of this, unfortunately for the Falling Devil, the Darkness Devil might have the Falling Devil's whole kit. See, the Darkness Devil, just like the Falling Devil, is able to manipulate forces at will, which is why when the Control Devil and the Darkness Devil both pointed at each other, they were both able to injure each other. And why when the Darkness Devil pointed his palm at the Control Devil, he was able to destroy its arm. On top of this, the Darkness Devil was able to cut off all of the arms of fiends, devils, and humans that teleported around it. And then it was able to take these arms and spell out the name of the Control Devil that I'm not gonna tell you, because spoilers. On top of this, after saying what is most definitely not an English word, the Darkness Devil is able to completely destroy somebody's body. However, just like with the Falling Devil, the Darkness Devil has a weakness, and that's light. Something that Denji was able to capitalize on after Santa Claus made a contract with the Darkness Devil by lighting himself on fire, and therefore creating light. And Denji, who if he has enough blood is able to regenerate endlessly, was simply able to just run around while on fire and continue attacking, which is actually also kind of an homage to the mangaka's first manga, Fire Fire Punch. And lastly, if you're injured by the Darkness Devil, it nullifies your ability to regenerate, at least some of the time, as some of the people who lost their arms to the Darkness Devil were never able to regenerate lost arms, while others were able to return to normal. It's kind of confusing. Now, with the two Primal Devils that we know of out of the way, we can speculate about what our second slot would have in terms of power, because our second slot is going to be the Death Devil. I believe that the Death Devil would manifest abilities similar to that of the other Primal Devils, that being Force Manipulation, Devil Manifestation, possibly Thought Manipulation, but more importantly than anything else, probably death. See, I believe that the Death Devil's abilities would be built around fear itself. If upon seeing the Death Devil, you begin to fear death, you die. Which would mean, while in the presence of the Death Devil, the only way to not be killed by the Death Devil is to not fear death, something that almost no human can pull off. But as the presence of this Death Devil is sheerly speculation, I can't go too far into depth about what its abilities will be. But I'm sure in the next couple of years, we'll find out. Which brings us to our number one spot, the Consumption Devil, Pochita. See, obviously, as it currently stands, yes, Pochita is the Chainsaw Devil. Once again, we're working with theories here. Pochita's abilities as the Chainsaw Devil are relatively simple. Pochita, like the other Primal Devils, also has nigh invincibility. Pochita, when launched into space by the Control Devil, was able to pull out his own heart and throw it back to Earth to regenerate a new body. Pochita has gone toe-to-toe with all of the weapons devils simultaneously, that being the Katana Devil, the Crossbow Devil, the Spear Devil, and the Halberd Devil. All hybrids just like him, who possess the insane level of regeneration that Pochita and Denji have. Not to mention that Pochita has also gone toe-to-toe with the Four Horsemen simultaneously, and Denji and Pochita as hybrids have cut up the Falling Devil countless times. Pochita and Denji have a relatively simple kit. They have the ability to manifest chainsaws from their hands, head, feet, and now objects that they're touching, like motorcycles. We've already said this. They have the ability to separate their chains from their arms or their legs and use them as whips that they can use to grab things or people, giving Denji and Pochita a somewhat Spider-Man-like ability if it was significantly more violent. Tie this into the fact that Denji as a hybrid is basically a perpetual motion machine so long as he has enough blood, meaning that as long as there's blood going into his system, he can move and fight forever. He has unlimited stamina. He's like a demon from Demon Slayer. And then tie that all into Pochita's Devil Erasure ability, which means if Pochita eats a devil, not only does the devil disappear, but also whatever they're based off of. Now, we don't necessarily know if this ability translates to Denji, as Denji did eat the entirety of the Control Devil, and yet the Control Devil re-manifested. But since we're talking about the devils and not the hybrids of the devils, Pochita most definitely has this ability. And the final cherry on top of all of those powers is the fact that Pochita, more likely than not, is the Consumption Devil, which means that every singular entity on Earth, including the other Primal Devils on this list, are afraid of him, which would make Pochita the singularly most feared concept on Earth, and in hell for that matter, which is why one day Pochita will rise above every other Primal Devil on this list. It's called being the main character, baby, and fortunately for the Chainsaw Man universe, if they go the direction that I've laid out, that main character winning makes a lot of sense. But then again, half of this video is built off a deep dive into psychology and theories, and we're talking about Chainsaw Man here. The manga where Denji, when taken over by Pochita, kidnapped Kobeni and made her play Dance Dance Revolution. There is no rules in this universe, and that's why I love it. But hopefully now you understand and love Chainsaw Man a little bit more. And if you guys do, tell me in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, hit that noti bell. God, I wish I could just step into Tatsuki Fujimoto's brain for a second.